The death of Satoru Gojo shook the anime world in a way that we haven't seen in a very long time. Not only was the emotional devastation evident on the internet, the effects of his death branched out into the real world, with some people even creating memorials in his honor. But what if I told you that the rumors of Gojo's death have been greatly exaggerated? What if I said it's very likely that we haven't seen the last of the real main character of JJK? What if I said the Honored One will return? Before we dive into too much detail, if you enjoy in-depth anime discussions and analysis, please make sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell to be among the first to know when new content drops. With that said, let's begin. So we've all seen it, right? The photo that took anime Twitter by storm, Gojo cleaved in half, dying on the ground. It was a tough image to see, and seems to bring an abrupt end to a character that we all know and love. This immediately sent people into a frenzy, grasping and begging for one iota of information hinting at a possible return. I mean, Gojo came back from death in his fight against Toji, so why can't he do it again, right? And thus, the internet did what it does. It got busy searching for answers to help breathe life into the embers that were the hopes of Gojo's return. And the internet came through. You see, not only do I believe Gojo will return, I am certain of it. So for the rest of the video, I'll be covering a myriad of information that all points in the direction of a triumphant return of our favorite Six Eyes wielder. Quickly though, I'd like to give a huge shout out to @JujutsuCurry on Twitter. She's largely responsible for gathering the information I'll be sharing with you today, so if you haven't already followed her, make sure to do that now. But before we go over the evidence of his return, I'd like to go over Gojo's character and the significance of the inspiration of his character specifically. If you didn't already know, Satoru Gojo's creation was directly inspired by Buddha, and the name Satoru literally means to understand and can be written to mean to be spiritually awakened or enlightened. His famous phrase that he uttered after resurrecting from his wounds that he suffered against Toji, quote, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one," end quote, finds its roots in the Lotus Sutra, which is the most important sutra of Mahayana Buddhism. Gojo, though, doesn't currently represent a fully enlightened Buddha, as you may have guessed from the fact that he still acts childish or even downright disrespectful at times. Currently, Gojo is more representative of someone on the path of the Bodhisattva, an individual on the path to awakening, but not quite there yet. Gojo has the ability to reach nirvana, a transcendent state without suffering or desire, but he doesn't because of his love and care for his students. You see, Buddha are different from Bodhisattva in the sense that they have achieved nirvana by transcending this world, the physical world, and all it has to offer. However, the Lotus Sutra teaches that you can achieve Buddhahood in your lifetime as you are, so transcendence doesn't actually require death, leaving this world. And this is where we get our first piece of information hinting to Gojo's return. In the chapter where we see Gojo's apparent death, we also get to see him in Limbo. While in Limbo, which is apparently an airport terminal, Gojo has a conversation with Nanami. During their conversation, Nanami uses symbolism to refer to two choices, north and south. He says that in a conversation about leaving the country, Mei had once told him, quote, "If you want to start anew, head north. If you want to return to your old self, head south," end quote. He then says that he chose south, and despite being a backward-looking person, he bet on the future in his final moment. So, what does this symbolize? Well, again, for some reason, Limbo in JJK is an airport terminal. We actually get to see a shot of Gojo, Geto, Haibara, and Nanami sitting on some chairs, with Gojo and Geto facing one way, while Haibara and Nanami face the other. Nanami specifically says during their conversation that he chose to go south and bet on the future with Haibara's encouragement, so the direction that they're facing can symbolize south, or death. Gojo and Geto facing the other side is also significant since Geto's soul hasn't had the chance to leave Limbo as his body hasn't been put to rest, and Gojo clearly hasn't left Limbo yet because, well, he's on the verge of death. Therefore, north can represent life, and like I said, south can represent death, with Geto and Gojo facing north, Haibara and Nanami facing south. This is important because Gojo, after hearing this, decides to go north. We know this because immediately after his conversation with Nanami, he says, quote, "I see, ... end quote, and still facing the same direction, north, sees Principal Yaga and says, quote, "Wasn't there supposed to be no such thing as a sorcerer dying without any regrets," end quote? This is significant for two reasons. One, Gojo could be alluding to not dying right now in saying that there's supposed to be no such thing as a sorcerer dying without any regrets. And two, facing away from Nanami and Haibara and instead to Yaga, his previous teacher, symbolizes Gojo choosing the path of returning to his students as their teacher and resuming his path of the Bodhisattva. Also, it is worth noting that at the end of this interaction, he waves goodbye to all of his friends that are sitting in Limbo, suggesting that he decided to go north and leave Limbo. So, what really happened there? This is a full circle moment for Gojo's character, tying all the way back to the big question that Geto asked him, quote, "Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?" End quote. This was a representation of Gojo dying to his old self, the strongest, and being born anew as his true self, Satoru Gojo. This isn't the only thing that we get in regards to a potential return during this chapter, though. As I stated before, the Lotus Sutra is considered to be the most important sutra in Mahayana Buddhism. Lotus flowers represent enlightenment. Since Gojo is appearing and acting as his teenage self in Limbo and not the version of him that we see die, we can assume that he hasn't reached enlightenment yet. So, what can we gather from the fact that we're shown 7 lotuses, Lotus Sutra, Lotus is enlightenment, at the end of this chapter? Well, not only are the lotus flowers significant, but so is the number 7, especially for Gojo's character. You see, 7 is a very important number in Buddhism, because it's stated that Buddha, on his path to enlightenment, took 7 steps forward, north, with a lotus flower appearing at every step. Not only that, Gojo's birthday is December 7th. So, the significance of both the number 7 and the lotus flower to Gojo's character, paired with the narrative path of his character, with him representing Buddha and needing to reach enlightenment, leads me to believe that these are intentional hints left by Akutami to let us know that he is coming back, this time as the true Satoru Gojo. It also helps that Buddha set out on his path to enlightenment at 29 years old, and Gojo is about to turn 29 in the manga timeline. Not enough yet? Well, let me offer up one more piece of evidence as to why I think he's coming back before I get to the how. The title for chapter 239 is Baka Survivor, or Idiot Survivor. This is a direct reference to the Bo 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 anime theme song, which is important because Gojo's death is nearly identical to the death of Tokoro in that series. They both get slashed in half, they've both got similar blood marks around their mouths, they fall in similar positions, and the Japanese below Tokoro in that manga image says, quote, "A sudden death happened," end quote. Sound familiar? Reminds me of the time that Gojo was literally winning at the end of one chapter, and then he's suddenly cut in half the next time we see him. Pretty sudden death, I would say. But why does any of this matter? Well, because Tokoro later gets revived, just like Gojo will be. It's pretty clear to me at this point that Gojo's character arc is far from complete, and Akutami is practically yelling in our faces, telling us outright that Gojo will be revived, and in the process, take another step toward enlightenment. So, now that we've established a pretty solid argument as to why he would be revived, let's explore how. Yet again, I believe Akutami used chapters 236 and 239 to basically outright tell us that Gojo is in fact coming back. In chapter 236, during their conversation in Limbo, Nanami states that curses can bring people back to life. So one option is a curse or maybe a curse technique could be responsible for bringing Gojo back. I do think it's also worth noting that whenever Nanami talks about this, a curse being able to save people or bring them back to life, this is literally right before he starts talking about the options to go north and south. So this is no accident here. But I digress. Later on in chapter 239, Kenjaku stabs Hazanoki through the neck with multiple cursed spirits. He says he did this in order to prevent him from using reverse curse technique to heal himself below the neck, since now his cursed energy can't travel from his brain to his body. So one option is Gojo using RCT on himself, especially since, number 1, his RCT just recharged before getting cleaved, and number 2, Akutami went out of his way to show us Gojo's head and neck in perfect condition. So with the first option, this would likely allow for Gojo to be brought back without any cost to himself, but RCT or maybe a binding vow will probably cost him the use of at least one of his eyes. The reason for this is it would take an enormous amount of cursed energy to put his body back together like that, and I don't believe that his regular RCT packs that kind of punch. Also, we may have been seeing some foreshadowing from Akutami recently over multiple mediums because we've seen a lot of material showing at least one of his eyes being obscured in some way. If he does lose the 6 eyes though, I do think there's a possibility it could be similar to Kakashi losing the Sharingan and becoming significantly stronger later on, while with less hacks. Gojo has always been innovative and hardworking in developing his abilities, especially when it comes to protecting those he cares about. So I could definitely see him, in order to compensate, creating some sort of other attack to make up for the difference that his 6 eyes gave him. But what would this look like? Well, I could specifically see him developing an additional ability on top of red, blue, and purple. The applications of his limitless technique are, well, limitless. So if he does lose the 6 eyes, I could see him compensating for that with something else. This hypothetical additional ability could be white. There seems to be some evidence of this in the promotional and cover art that we've seen, because we see him raising his hand and a white light emanating. However, the white light might be his domain expansion, so maybe not, but I do think it's worth noting that this is a possibility. Don't even ask me what I think this ability would do. I am not smart enough to figure that out, but I do think that if he does develop this ability, like I said, it might be able to make up for the difference between, where he is now without the 6 eyes and where he was with the 6 eyes. Plus, I think that Gojo has been so dominant in the series for so long because he has so much power, and the 6 eyes obviously helps with that. So even if he does get less powerful in losing the 6 eyes, and he doesn't have some kind of crazy ability that helps compensate for that fully, I think that it would be good narratively for him to be dropped down a few pegs so that the rest of the cast can sort of have their time to shine. That said, I do believe Gojo will be coming back soon. Sticking with the number 7, I could see him coming back in either chapter 243, 7 chapters after his death, or chapter 250, 7 chapters after that. Regardless of how or when he comes back, Gojo will definitely be a force to reckon with and have some incredible character development on his path to enlightenment. I'm hoping that we get to see him take on more of a teacher role in his return and help prepare Yuji for his final battle with Sukuna. And I do think that it would be so cool, and I think it's actually sort of been foreshadowed, that we're going to be able to see a battle between Yuji and Sukuna while we see Gojo's final battle with Kenjaku, to bring a conclusion to the two main storylines we've been witnessing take place throughout the series. So let's review. We've already established that Gojo can come back by using a binding vow or RCT at the cost of the 6 eyes, or maybe a cursed spirit bringing him back to life like Nanami sort of suggested, but there are also lots of narrative and plot point reasons for him to come back. Number 1, his character development and his character arc. We have not seen the guy that represents Buddha and enlightenment reach enlightenment, so we need to see that. I think that is a part of his character and his character arc, so I do believe that's going to play a part in this. But also all of the symbolism with, the parallels between the Bobobo anime theme song and the, Tokoro getting cut in half and coming back later. All of these things seem to point all of us in the direction that Gojo will make a triumphant return. So I'm excited for it. I hope that you guys are excited for it. And honestly, Gojo is my favorite character in this series, so I was pretty devastated whenever he died. But I do think that Akutami has a chance to break the internet and do something truly spectacular. But I want to know what you guys think. Am I 100% correct? Am I completely off? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, make sure to follow @JujutsuCurry on Twitter for even more information on Gojo's return and JJK updates in general. She puts out some great stuff, so shout out to her once again. I will say there's also a lot more information in that mega thread that I pulled a lot of this information from, so if you want some more ammunition toward, the Sukuna loving friends that you have that are getting down on you about Gojo's death, go check that out. All kinds of cool stuff over there. I'll put a link to her account in the description. But thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day.